Well, it was a great time for the newspaper business.
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, I think there were 28 papers in New York alone, daily papers, and it really is the beginning of, I mean, one of the things that I find fascinating about the story, there are a lot of firsts for me in terms of, American culture, and it really is the beginning of sort of modern, and I hate to say tabloid journalism, but the fascination that the public has with, I call them the currencies of power, the sex, beauty, money, celebrity. Evelyn was sort of the first celebrity in a lot of ways. I say she's the first it girl before anybody knew what it was. And you had this fantastic, again, convergence of a rich and powerful man who was sort of old money with a thaw, who was also, a millionaire, and this beautiful girl. And it all came together, and the people just couldn't get enough of it. In fact, it led to, among other things, I mean, the Thaw trial itself is a sort of fascinating cultural moment, and the term brainstorm, the use of alienists, all these kinds of things that we now know of or have versions of, actually came into existence because of this trial. I mean, even the jury selection was enough to make the headlines every day for 2 years almost.
What did the public think of Evelyn about this?
Well, it's very interesting because the public, in the first trial, there actually were two trials. A lot of people don't know that. In the first trial, she was sort of portrayed as the young, innocent, naive girl from the provinces who had been terribly wronged by this lecherous Stanford White, and Harry Thaw was the knight in shining armor who was going to avenge her. In fact, Harry was banking on the fact that they would be able to, he would get off by what he called the unwritten law, which was this sort of quaint Victorian idea that a man could, with impunity, kill another man if he was defending his wife's honor or sister. That was actually what they were going with in that first trial. It was sort of astonishing, and it says something about the time that in 1906 you had enough of the public willing to sort of buy into this perception that that's what it was. But then within a year, the first trial ends with a hung jury, and everybody was astonished, and Evelyn had to get on the stand and tell all the things that had happened to her and what she had been involved with. And within a year, nobody was really able to buy anymore either the unwritten law or the innocence, the absolute innocence of the girl, or the shining knight figure of Harry. And so the whole defense then became a question of insanity with Harry.
Harry's lawyers painted him as insane, claiming that he believed he had shot Stanford White under divine orders. I guess that wasn't working out, so they had to put Evelyn on the stand.
Yeah, I think one of the more dramatic moments for me in the book is when you think about it. I mean, common sense would say, okay, Evelyn has witnessed this horrible murder of the only man she ever loved, which is what she said over and over again. And from my point of view, that was the point. I would have gotten on a boat and hightailed it out of town and let Harry get his just desserts and go to the electric chair. But Evelyn just wasn't going to do that. And whatever, if you want to call it sort of extremely misplaced loyalty or a level of feeling that she had for Harry, I mean, she was convinced that the only thing that she could do was to save him from going to the electric chair. And so there's the moment in the book where she's called to the Thaw family suite, and she walks in and she meets the person who's going to be the head of Harry's defense team, and Mother Thaw is sitting there. I think I describe her, she's like an Easter Island statue. And and the lawyer says, well, it's very simple. The only way Harry's going to get off, because let's face it, he shot Stanford White in front of, almost 1,000 witnesses. The only way he's going to get off is if you get on the stand and say what White did to you, because that would be the only thing that would work. And the Thaw family was absolutely against, Mother Thaw was absolutely against any kind of suggestion that Harry was crazy. And so Evelyn sort of said, well, I don't want Harry to be electrocuted. And so she did go on the stand.
So what became of her?
Well, it's funny. If I had to say I regret anything about the book, it's that I could have written a book that was twice as long, but I wanted to sort of capture the cultural moment that I think is most significant in terms of her life and her position as the American Eve. But the sad thing is, and it's not surprising, that she quickly sort of found herself, first of all, cut off by the Thaws. The idea that they were going to somehow take care of her as long as she testified in Harry's favor was not true. She was left penniless by the Thaws. She ended up having a child whom she claimed was Harry's as a result of a conjugal visit to the insane asylum, and became sort of, she was a single mother. She tried performing in vaudeville. She tried silent films. Again, this figure that I find fascinating, but this is only mentioned briefly in the book, that she went on to a number of other sort of smaller tragedies, but ultimately sort of survived morphine addiction and alcoholism and suicide attempts and things, and sort of came out of it all. She's like a phoenix for me. She sort of rises out of her own ashes several times. But she lived to be 82 years old and ended up the last 20 years or so in California. She lived with her son and his family, and she ran a sculpture studio. In fact, it turns out that probably her greatest talent was in sculpting, so that's what she did in her later years. And she always was a voracious reader, and she sort of spent the last years of her life corresponding with people and friends in letters, and she was a very good writer, actually. I was lucky enough to have a collector who loaned me his private collection of letters that she wrote, about 600 letters when she was in her 70s. So she ended up sort of accepting, she called it the everlasting now. She was very sort of blasé about the whole thing ultimately, and said she could never really enjoy the infamy, but she said that, she enjoyed the idea that she rocked civilization. That was her own term. But that she was content to live in the everlasting now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Writer Paula Uruburu. Her book is American Eve, Evelyn Nesbit, Stanford White, The Birth of the It Girl, and the Crime of the Century.